My call back here in Chicago, as promised, with a special guest, Dave Wannstedt. I mean, you won a national championship, you won a Super Bowl, head coach of the Dolphins, head coach of the Bears, head coach at Pitt. You've done everything, my man.
Is that good or bad?
It's good.
What are you trying to say?
It's solid.
Okay.
We want to get your insight on the NFL draft because we are so close to it. So give me the idea of the evaluation of a draft from a head coach's perspective.
Well, the most important thing I always thought from a head coach's perspective was you have to trust your people. You know, there's so many of these head coaches that they want to do it all. It's impossible to do it all. With all the different avenues to collect information nowadays, you want to be as thorough as you can. You want to turn over every stone. So you have to trust your scouts. And I always thought that the meetings that you have, you want to hear everybody's opinion. Mm-hmm. If it's one or two guys talking, hey, the guys that may have been at the school the most time and may have the most real information don't get a chance to say anything. So I thought communication from everybody was really important. And then when I was evaluating them, I always wanted to talk about production. Is the guy a playmaker at any position? Offensive line, everybody thinks playmakers, you're talking about receivers.
Right.
You know, I looked at playmakers as defensive linemen as well as an offensive lineman. And, you know, what kind of production does he have and how long has he done it? Is he a one-year wonder or has this guy produced, 3 or 4 years? When we drafted Emmitt Smith at the Cowboys, Emmitt was a 4-year starter at Florida, but his times weren't that good. He ran like 4.6 and everybody questioned his height, his size, but his production was good, and that's when Jimmy Johnson said, hey, I want him.
Well, it's funny you went there, because that was my next topic, is as a fan, as a guy who's never been through this, I would think what you did in college should matter at least as much, if not more, than at a combine, when you're not wearing pads, when you're jumping on a box, you know?
You know what, you're 100% right. I made a mistake. I'll give you the other side of the Emmitt Smith. We're sitting in the draft room at the Miami Dolphins. We got the 21st pick of the draft. Drew Brees is sitting there. And I'm talking to our personnel guys, and the discussion was there hasn't been a quarterback taller than 6 foot that's won a Super Bowl. So we pass on Drew Brees. And it probably ultimately cost me my job.
Really?
You know what I mean? Because our quarterback got hurt, Jay Fiedler, and we didn't have anyone else in place.
Yeah.
So you can get hung up on that. Hey, this kid they're talking about out of Pitt, Aaron Donald.
Sure, the D lineman.
The D lineman that won, the Outland won every defensive award that you could almost win. I recruited him. He was in my last recruiting class at Pitt. I recruited him. He played for me as a freshman. He's about 6 foot, 280. Don't put him on a scale. Don't go by his measurables.
Right.
But the guy makes plays,
yeah.
And that's what everybody's looking at.
So in that vein, Johnny Manziel, yay or nay? Would you feel good drafting
Johnny
him?
Manziel, playmaker. Put him in that category. But are you sure?
Off the field stuff?
Off the field stuff is solid.
Yeah.
Aaron Donald, he's solid.
What does a head coach do? I mean, this is Wednesday. The draft is Thursday. The night before the draft. And I know it's a little different now that it's in prime time and it's been spread out. But still, the night before the draft, what's the head coach do? What's the head coach thinking?
You know what? You've already gone through all your mock drafts. And you know what you do the night before the draft? You talk yourself out of the guys that you wanted to draft. That's how sick it is. You have so much information, and you've done your mock drafts, but that now you're starting to second guess. Sometimes you can get too much information on guys. But I always thought, and right now everybody's talking about trading, and half those guys, everybody likes to talk about trading. Very few GMs, head coaches have the authority to make a trade.
Yeah.
I learned that lesson a long time ago. And a lot of guys that their jobs are on the line, they obviously they're going to take a very conservative pick. So you have to really analyze each team and say these guys are going to make a decision on their history and what's going on in the present moment with this franchise, because it does change. So, it varies. But I was always, you're set. You know who you want.
Is the actual draft day stressful? If the guy you want gets taken the pick before you, if a trade you want all of a sudden goes away?
That has happened on occasion, but generally what most teams do, we call it the bullpen. We would have a bullpen of about 4 guys. We always kept 4 in there. And you convince yourself. It's everybody right now is going to have the greatest draft going, whoever you take. We're going to the Super Bowl. And you had 4 guys right there that really, if I took him, or him, he would help our football team win.
Right.
And that's really what you want to get accomplished. And you really like those 4 guys. Now, nobody admits that he's the top guy. Very few people will say, he's the guy we wanted, but they have him prioritized.
Well, the cool thing with having you here is your experience as the NFL and a college head coach. So I'm curious the comparison draft day versus signing day. And is one more enjoyable? Is one more stressful than the other?
I think at the end of the day, it's the same emotions. The recruiting class, we got everybody. We got the great recruiting class. It's the best we've had. The alumni are happy. Everybody's happy. With the draft, we got all the players we needed. We filled the needs. The fans are happy. Everybody's going to Super Bowl. Everybody's going to national championship.
Yeah.
You know, the emotions are the same, but obviously the way it falls is different.
Two more questions for you. One, no matter what, you can find a two-star kid in college who becomes an NFL player. You can also find the 199th pick in the draft ending up being Tom Brady. How do you do that, though?
Well, you put as a head coach, and when I was as the Dolphins, I was head coach and GM, so I made sure that the emphasis from our scouts that we were going to finish this draft. In other words, the last pick that we making the point, is going to be as important. Because really, you know what it comes down to? I'll give you an example. When I was at the Dolphins, we drafted two kids out of Wisconsin. We took in the first round Jamar Fletcher, a defensive back. He won the Thorpe Award. And he didn't develop into the player that we had thought. In the second round, we took a receiver from Wisconsin, Chris Chambers. Okay, he's not a sixth-round pick like Brady, but he was a second-round pick, and he came in and eventually went to Pro Bowls. Mm-hmm. So the key is you draft players that are going to make your team. Because if they make your team, they're going to make you better. And you're going to win more games. So, I mean, you got to keep that focus all along. I never liked going out there and taking a chance on a guy that ran 4.2 but was a track guy.
Right.
And you really said, oh, he runs 4.2. Everybody's going to get excited about him. But in the back of your mind, you're saying, is he really going to make our team? Probably not. I'd rather take the sure bet.
Let me get one final thought on the Big Ten. Michigan State last year just continued that quiet rise that Mark D'Antonio has done. I'm curious your thoughts on what he's done so well in charge of that program and the possibility that they could repeat again this year.
Well, I think I've got some real first-hand information on Michigan State, or feeling, because Mark was at Cincinnati. We competed against each other when I was at Pitt. We were on some committees together. That program has probably been the under the radar more than anybody in the country. When you look at the number of wins he's had, the conference wins that he's had, what he's accomplished in a short amount of time, it's really remarkable. And he is steady. And I used the phrase before, when you see him on the sidelines, he's got that, and his press conferences are very similar to Bill Belichick, who's a Hall of Famer. And Mark's...
He's focused.
He's focused. I mean, it's all business with him. I think every day if you walk in, you know what Mark wants recruiting-wise. You know what type of offense. You know what type of defense. He graduates players this year. They graduate 10 players this year. But why I like him to repeat, they got their quarterback back. They got both running backs back. They got 4 or 5 receivers back. And if you look at their schedule, they got Oregon early. Big game.
Yeah.
And then they have Ohio State at home, Michigan at home, and they finish up on the road at Penn State. So I like their schedule. If they can fill in some of those holes on defense, they've got a real chance to compete and be in the final game at the end.
Very cool insight. Dave Wannstedt, thanks for taking the time and being with us
Thank
today.
you. Enjoyed it.